I'm about to tell you something contrary to so much advice you've already received, and here it is. Don't give yourself permission to produce a first memoir draft that is of poor quality and less than what you want. In this video, I will elaborate on 4 pillars that will enable you, well, eventually, of course, to write better than so many writing teachers have encouraged you to do. You will learn to produce at a higher level, that is, at a more polished level, so that 60 to 80% of your first draft will make its way into your final draft. That's what I always aim for, and you can too, and you should. But first, let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Denis Ledoux, the founder of the Memoir Network, where writers who want to write a memorable and interesting memoirs turn to for help. We've helped thousands of writers, and we can help you too. In this video, I urge you to get rid of the idea that your first draft always has to be deleted and put into the potty. You can learn to write a better first draft than that. If this sounds like what you want to learn to do, stay on to the end of this video. Pillar 3 will contain a question that will change your writing. Today I'm here to tell you that there will be many sentences and paragraphs in your first draft writing that will find their way into your final memoir draft. And of course, there will be sentences and paragraphs that you will delete quite happily, but these shouldn't be in the minority. Don't shortchange yourself with the belief that your first memoir version has to be an embarrassment and will be worthy only of the potty. It does not have to be that way. The choice is yours. You can learn to write as best as you can, even in the first story draft. Or you can convince yourself that you will be writing a terrible first draft. At the end of this video, I will ask you a question that may change how you write. In a moment, I will provide you with 4 pillars to better writing that will help you to write efficiently and well from the beginning of drafting your memoir. I will also offer you an exception that proves the rule. This is the second part of a series of videos on memoir writing pillars. In an earlier video, I spoke about the 3 pillars of starting a memoir well. Thousands have viewed it. See the description below for a link to that video. And now here is a sequel, the 4 pillars of writing a good first memoir draft, which I hope will prove as popular as the first one. Okay, now for our pillars. The first pillar is expect quality of yourself even as you produce for quantity in your first memoir draft. What you expect is something that you will work towards to make happen. If you expect a bad first draft, you will produce a bad first draft. And if you expect a good first draft, you will produce a good first draft. So expect quality, and you'll get quality in your first memoir version. While a first life story draft implies that there will be a second, this is not to say that your first memoir draft need be execrable. I'm not trying to say that after your first draft writing there won't be much work to do on your story. That's not what I'm saying at all. Yes, writers must expect to write a second draft and a third even. No one can sit down and churn out countless pages of prose that don't need rewriting. Jack Kerouac claimed that that's what he did when he wrote On the Road, but we know now that he was stretching the truth. His editor, Robert Giroux at Farrar Straus, did extensive editing of Kerouac's books. By the way, if it's an editor you are looking for, contact us for a free consultation. Yes, writing a first memoir draft is your opportunity to let all the words you have bottled up inside of you spill out onto the page. You must go for quantity in the first draft. Writing for quantity may seem to corroborate the idea that your first draft has to be awful, but it isn't so. Bear with me. While there are bound to be spelling errors, grammatical errors, factual errors, and missing information, and while these might not matter so much at this early stage, this does not give you permission to write poorly, to let bad writing slip in, even if you know it's bad. Don't tell yourself, oh, this is supposed to deserve the potty, isn't it? Let me repeat so that there is no doubt in your mind about what I am saying. What you are doing, writing for quantity at this creation stage, is exactly right. One important part about writing a first memoir draft is to write it all down. But that is not to say that you must write sloppily. This first pillar, which acknowledges you are writing for quantity, does not advocate not editing your first draft. Of course, you'll look up the right spellings, you'll correct the grammar, and you'll fill in the missing information. I always do. My goal is always to write the best first story draft that I can write. This editing can be done as you write, when you are most involved in your text, so that any corrections and alterations are in keeping with the tone and the focus of your story. In this way, your first draft will result in 60 to 80% of your final draft. It may take you a while to learn to write this way, but learning this is possible if you commit to learning. After writing a good first memoir draft, your anxieties about writing will dissipate when it is done. You will know that you can, in fact, write memories well in the first go-around. You know that your life stories will live in some fashion, even as that first draft may still be 20 to 40% off what you hope the final memoir draft will be. You will have a tremendous sense of accomplishment. However, you are certain to feel some disappointment with that draft. Every writer feels disappointment at some stage. It's par for the course, and you need to let it not discourage you. Now let's move on to the second pillar, which is a corollary of the first. The second pillar is this: demand much of your writing. Your first draft ought not to be an occasion for you to tell yourself, this is not good enough. No, I'm always urging you to write as best you can, even in the first draft. Now let me give you an example of memoir writing as best as you can, even in the first draft when you demand much of yourself. Let's say you wrote initial beginning. Those who advocate writing without revision will counsel you to leave that combination alone, to be reworked later. But I say stop right now. Take the time to follow your inclination and delete the word initial, because, of course, all beginnings are initial. Or let's say, for another memoir writing example, you have written, having grown up in another era that was more community-oriented than the one in which I grew up, I envied my grandparents. You could let that faulty relationship of introductory phrase and subject go for a later revision. But I would correct it immediately so that the introductory phrase modifies the subject as it should. Your text would now read after revision, having grown up in another era that was more community-oriented than the one in which I grew up, my grandparents had a childhood that I envied. For a third memoir writing example, don't let yourself write something like, I hated my bedroom with its wallpaper. Of course, this sentence is grammatically correct, but this is not vigorous writing. There is so much unsaid here. Even at this stage, you can do better and explore your thoughts. You can write, I hated my bedroom. At 7, I had thought my bedroom, with its little girl wallpaper full of pink cartoony animals, was so cute. But why didn't my parents accept that, now that I was 17, I should be allowed to repaper my room? That's better. But I would even delete the words little girl, so that at 7, I had thought my bedroom with its little girl wallpaper full of pink cartoony animals was so cute would now read, at 7, I had thought my bedroom with its wallpaper full of pink cartoony animals was so cute. Since we know the girl was 7, we do not need the words little girl to remind us that she was a little girl. We know a girl of 7 is a little girl. These memoir writing examples demonstrate that even at the first draft stage, if you insist on maintaining standard in your first draft writing, you can add or subtract details that make the text more interesting and meaningful. It's just not an efficient use of your time to procrastinate and say, "Oh, I'll do that later. It's good enough for now." Write as best as you can in the first draft. Yes, you can do these corrections later, but doing them immediately will bring your text to a higher level of readability while you are still in the imagined time of your memoir. Rewriting, editing at this point, will result in faster writing over the long run. Doing this memoir rewriting immediately can bring your text to the 60 to 80% level that is possible in the first draft. I believe it is important to call into play all that you know about good writing at every stage of your composition. Now, let's move on to pillar number 3. The third pillar is disappointment is always in the background. The poet T.S. Eliot wrote in his poem, The Hollow Men, "Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow." What did he mean? Well, he meant that what you produce will never be a fit for what you imagined. The shadow, or your production, always falls short and brings with it disappointment. Yes, you will likely be disappointed in your memoir text. I am usually, and I guess you probably will be too. Now, let's look at disappointment as an asset. Let's stand it on its head. Disappointment, if you sit thoughtfully with it, can produce many ideas that spur you on to an even better second draft. Instead of becoming negative about what you wrote and deleting it, ask yourself what you really want to say in this sentence and in that one. Now, work at the micro level this way. Here's an important question you must ask yourself repeatedly. What do I really mean to say here? This question will change your writing. It has mine. Each sentence can now be mined for more meaning. The example previously about the little girl wallpaper is an example of what can happen when you ask, what do I really mean to say here? Some will say this is second draft work. Well, good for them. I will not equivocate or argue with them. But I do believe it can be done in the first draft. Just ask the question, what do I really mean to say here? Always go to, what do I really mean to say here? This exercise is an effective prompt for clarity and honesty in your writing, and it should be repeated frequently as you write your first draft. Your life story will be clearer in your head. You'll keep and develop the good stuff and happily leave out what you now see as less than good, dross. Just as importantly, you will read your work with a more critical eye. You'll find places where you can expand your autobiography to say what you really mean to say, and you will realize your characters can be made more vivid. You will start to notice themes in your work. Notice them early on, and the way your story connects to something larger than you had originally thought. While I agree that writing a first draft can be an opportunity to write wildly, feverishly, and frantically, as many writing teachers advocate, I also urge you to use your investment of time in your first memoir draft well. Use it efficiently. The better you write at this stage, the less rewriting you will have to do later. Spoiler alert, you will always have the urge to rewrite, even after your book is published. Before we move on to pillar number 4, let me repeat, as you write pages and pages in which you describe the who, the what, the where, and the when of the story, demand of yourself that you write as best as possible. Refer to your memory list. I have several videos on the memory list here on YouTube, which is the memory list is a listing of everything you remember about the period of your life that you are writing about. The list comes in handy as you flesh out scenes and vignettes. Keep asking, what do I really mean to say here, for every memory list item. Later, as you rework the piece, the why. the why of your story, will have become much clearer. The why often is not entirely evident as you begin to write. Now, let's move on to the fourth pillar. The fourth pillar is perfectionism is not your friend. It is counterproductive to reward yourself for being a perfectionist. Think of the first draft process of writing as fixing the story in the same way that in days when photographs were fixed by chemicals, that stage was important if the image was not to be lost. Your first draft is the stage when you fix your story and keep it from being lost. The previous three pillars, which advocated more careful writing, were not at all about perfectionism. Let me be clear. Perfectionism is never a virtue at any stage of writing. If by perfectionism you mean to be mired in a swamp of endless and ultimately meaningless alterations, perfectionism will vitiate your memoir. I've seen writers change the word home for house and then back to home. And they'll say, "Oh, I just want my memoir to be perfect." Well, what they are doing is just wasting their time and nursing their anxiety. The result of this perfectionism is often stilted prose. No, in the first draft, it is better to keep writing for the best 60 to 80% good volume you are capable of, to get the story into a document and to get the whole sweep of your memoir written. Quantity at this stage has this going for it. It will encourage you to keep writing as you see your pages stack up. You will have a tangible experience of your efforts adding up to something. When I mention quantity, I'm not advocating sloppy writing, just the notion that you are involved in a process of writing that, while it will lead inevitably to a revision, the better the first draft is, the less work you will have to do later. Quality should enter big time at every stage, as it must, and it is not to be neglected as you are writing your first memoir draft. Over time, you will rework your piece for various stylistic elements, and eventually you will have a memoir that you are ready to launch into the world. But for now, get your first life story draft written and commit to your first draft being a quality basis for a second draft. I'm not talking here about 100% quality. I'm talking 60 to 80% quality. There are many stages in the memoir writing process. Writing your first draft is just one of them. Let it be an early stage. Okay, let it be rougher, less complete, and less accurate than you want it to be. But commit to making it as good as you can make it. Go for 60 to 80%. Again, I'm not advocating 100% at this stage. In a minute, I'll ask you to respond to an important final question. But first, I want to make sure to remind you to subscribe to this channel. Just click on the subscribe button below. If you want exclusive writing guidance that I share with my newsletter subscribers, click on the link in the description of this video for your membership into the newsletter. Join the thousands of writers who have written better memoirs thanks in part to all the help we have sent them. This newsletter is free. If you want help to write your memoir, contact us for a free consultation. And here's my question for you. Will you read your memoir with, "What do I really mean to say here?" in mind? Leave a comment below about what you intend to do and what were the results of having done it. And remember to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Good luck writing your memoir.